This case takes place in Australia in the year 2016. In February of 2016, two young backpackers, Beatrice and Lena, embarked on what they believed would be an unforgettable journey across Australia. But this once-in-a-lifetime adventure, however, took a horrific turn. Meet Lena. At the time of this case beginning, Lena was a 23-year-old backpacker from Germany. Lena had often dreamed of visiting the country of Australia. It was something that she had wanted to do for some time. So at some point in 2016, Lena decided to embark on a journey to the country. Her plans were to explore as much of Australia as possible, to experience the diverse landscapes and the culture. Ironically, Lena ended up watching the movie Wolf Creek. This is something that a lot of backpackers do before visiting Australia. For those who don't know, this is a movie where backpackers are traveling through Australia when they are attacked and murdered by a madman in the middle of nowhere. Lena watched this movie with a friend, and when it finished, the friend voiced their concern about such a thing happening in real life. However, Lena assured him that this was just a work of pure fiction, but it was actually indeed inspired by true events. Lena arrived in Australia, and at some point she found herself in a hostel in Adelaide, a city in southern Australia. Hostels are the usual spots where fellow backpackers can meet each other, and it's at this hostel where Lena met a woman by the name of Beatrice. Beatrice was a fellow 23-year-old backpacker from Brazil. Due to them being a similar age and of course traveling Australia, they got along well and had much in common. The two quickly developed a friendship. As the two conversed, they realized that they were both planning to do the same trip. Both women wanted to drive from Adelaide to Melbourne, with the intention of experiencing the scenic Great Ocean Road. Driving from Adelaide to Melbourne via the Great Ocean Road is a journey covering approximately 1,000 kilometers, or around 620 miles. If driven non-stop, this route would take anyone around 13 to 14 hours. However, most people take around 5 days to complete the trip, camping along the way and taking in the views. The two had an idea. Why not go on this trip together? And so they began to plan. However, there was an issue. Neither of them had a vehicle. Now, it's common in Australia for people to go to various sites such as Facebook or Gumtree and post an advert seeking all manner of things: employment, advice, or travel companions. The two friends made use of these sites for this purpose. They shared on these sites that they were two young girls looking to do the ocean road trip to Melbourne, seeking someone with a car who would be willing to take them soon. Perhaps someone was already planning this route, and this way they could share in the petrol money. The girls got some replies. A man who was close to their age replied. This man told the two girls that they would be welcome to join him as he would soon be taking the journey. Everything was set. That was until there was an unexpected hiccup in this plan. The man who had intended on joining them instead had to cancel the course at the last minute. He had some car troubles. This unexpected change led them to consider alternative options. They had to go back to the drawing board, so the two women decided to look at the other responses they had gotten from the advertisement. The only person willing to help them on this trip was a 59-year-old man by the name of Roman Hines. The girls spoke to Roman. They felt that something was a little off. Roman could be rather abrupt when communicating with the girls via text, but they chalked this up to just his age. Roman would also pressure the girls. If they didn't respond fast enough, he would double and triple text them, telling them not to waste his time. But the two girls had no other options, and so they accepted his offer for a ride. The 9th of February 2016 was the day that the two women had planned to meet Roman. They agreed on a meeting spot and made their way to the destination, and Roman was there waiting for them. The three said hi and placed their bags into his boot and then entered his vehicle. They then set off on their journey. But they had no idea that they had just entered the car of one of Australia's most dangerous men. Roman Hines was born in West Germany and migrated to Australia in 1959 with his parents and his older brothers. He married twice, but both marriages ended in divorce, and he had 5 children. Roman was known to be violent and had anger issues. He even had a disturbing criminal past, or a criminal past that should have had him monitored at all times by the police, especially his online activities. What I'm about to share with you is beyond infuriating. On one occasion in 2014, Roman had given a woman a ride from Adelaide in his car. When they were in a secluded area, he forced himself upon the woman. Roman was found guilty but was later placed on a good behavior bond with specific conditions. He was no longer allowed to use an electronic device to arrange personal contact with other people. However, in December of 2014, he breached this bond and attacked another woman. Despite this, it doesn't seem that he served any jail time, or at least I can't find it online. But something else happened just a month before the trip with Beatrice and Lena. Roman had an ex-girlfriend, a woman named Sylvia Clark. Just a month before Roman would meet the two women, Sylvia was staying over at his home. One night, she woke up to find her left hand tied to the bed. Terrified, Sylvia looked around the room. Stood over her was Roman. Roman proceeded to beat her and bite her. He then forcibly attempted to separate her legs. Sylvia felt too scared to resist, so she allowed Roman to do what he wanted. Following this attack, she ended their relationship and cancelled a planned camping trip to a place called Salt Creek. Sadly, Sylvia was so embarrassed and ashamed of what happened to her that she didn't go to the police. This is the type of person who Roman is, and now he had two young girls in his car with him all alone. The three were making some progress on their way to Melbourne, when all of a sudden, without asking, Roman made an unexpected turn, a turn towards Salt Creek. Salt Creek is a small settlement located in southern Australia, approximately 164 kilometers away from Adelaide. Those who enter should be well prepared when visiting. Salt Creek is considered to be extremely remote, a place for a depraved individual like Roman to carry out his twisted fantasies. Roman pulled up and told the girls that they would be setting up camp there for the night. The girls were confused. Not a single person was in sight. However, the drive so far had been pleasant, and Roman had been patient with the girls when they wanted to stop and take photographs. So to some degree, they felt at ease. Roman began setting up the camp for the two girls. He was quiet, but rather strange. The girls weren't too worried, but they did feel that something was slightly off. Beatrice began helping him set up the camp for the night, but Lena was tired, so she decided to sleep for a little bit inside the car. When Lena was sleeping, Roman spoke with Beatrice. He explained that he had noticed some kangaroo footprints in the sand. He said that if she wanted to snap some photographs of the kangaroos, he would be able to track them and find them for her. Trusting his local knowledge and believing was just part of the adventure, Beatrice agreed to follow him. The two began walking for some time into the secluded sand dunes. Minutes passed with no kangaroos anywhere in sight. Beatrice then told Roman not to worry and said that they should just return to the camp and maybe they'll see some later. But as she turned to walk back, Roman grabbed her. He wrapped his arm around her neck from behind and then pushed her to the ground. Roman had also been concealing a hammer and a knife in his pants. He also had with him some rope. Roman revealed the knife before pulling out the rope, hinting at Beatrice not to fight back. He began to tie her rope, but she defied him. She attempted to grab the rope, but Roman told her that if she did resist, he would break her arms, and things would be very much worse off for her. Roman then began licking and kissing Beatrice, before continuing to essay her. She pleaded with Roman not to continue, but he didn't listen. In fact, her pleading infuriated him, and he began striking her with his fists. It was in this moment that Beatrice accepted that she may not survive this attack. However, she came up with a plan of her own. She told Roman that she actually wanted this too, and said that he could continue to do whatever he wanted to do under one condition: they returned to the camp, so that they wouldn't be in the open. Roman was rather taken aback, but he agreed. He got Beatrice up and began walking back to the camp with her. But as they approached the camp, Roman had a change of heart. Perhaps he realized that Beatrice was just trying to get him close enough to the camp so that Lena would be able to help. By this point, the camp was in sight, when all of a sudden, Roman began taking Beatrice again away from the camp. Realizing that this could be the end, Beatrice screamed with all of her might. She shouted for her friend Lena, hoping and praying that she would be able to help. Seconds later, Roman began viciously beating Beatrice, trying to render her unconscious. But thankfully, Lena had heard the commotion. She awoke from her slumber to blood-curdling screams. This moment must have been terrifying, but she pushed the fear to one side and jumped to action. She ran towards the direction of the scream she had heard, and before too long she saw her friend laying naked in the sand, with Roman standing over her. Upon seeing this, Lena was understandably in a state of shock. She bravely shouted, "Let her go." Roman then turned his attention towards Lena. He began walking towards her. Beatrice screamed, telling Lena to run. She shouted to be careful, as Roman had a knife. Lena ran to her car to grab her mobile phone, in hopes of calling someone to help. But Roman was far faster than she anticipated. As Lena was looking in the backseat of the car for her phone, Roman snuck up behind her and struck her over the head with a hammer. The force of the strike was so great that blood instantly began pouring from her head. Lena was in a daze. In just a few moments, she had gone from sleeping to seeing her friend being assayed in front of her, and then she was struck with a hammer. The confusion she felt must have been intense. However, somehow, Lena was able to defend herself. She engaged in a desperate struggle with Roman, who at this point was in a crazed frenzy. In the struggle, Lena was hit with the hammer 3 more times, causing horrific injuries. Lena was losing a large amount of blood, but miraculously, she was able to run away. As Lena was running, Roman got into his car and started his engine. Meanwhile, Lena ran towards Beatrice, making sure that she was okay. The two were now together again. Beatrice was naked and terrified, even more worried now as she could see that Lena was in a horrific state. But the two didn't have chance to speak much. They turned to see Roman driving towards them in his car. In this moment, the two instinctively decided to split up and go in separate directions. Beatrice ran and was able to hide in the bushes in the sand dunes, but Roman had spotted Lena running, and he decided to follow her. In the vehicle, Roman chased Lena as she ran. For over 1 kilometer, Lena ran for her life into the secluded dunes. She ran in a zigzag pattern to avoid ending up under Roman's tires. Roman was relentless. If she stopped for just a moment, she would die a horrifying death. She had no choice but to keep running and running. After being chased in the heat, and after sustaining horrific injuries, and after losing so much blood, Lena began to slow down. She knew that she wouldn't be able to outrun Roman in his car. It would be impossible. But she wasn't done yet. Due to the sand dunes, Roman ended up being a slight distance away from Lena as he had gotten stuck. But he was beginning to drive towards her again. Lena turned and began running towards Roman's car. She then jumped onto the bonnet and then got onto the roof. Blood was still pouring from Lena's head, so much so that it began raining down on the roof of the car. Roman began screaming, demanding that Lena come down from the roof at once. He continued driving, trying to shake her off. Meanwhile, kilometers away, Beatrice was hiding in the bushes, unaware of the fate of Lena. But then, she heard a noise, the sound of a car. Beatrice realized that this was her chance. Cars don't come around this area too often. Inside the car were a bunch of young men. They were enjoying the scenic route, when all of a sudden, a terrified and naked Beatrice ran into the middle of the road, trying to flag them down. Initially, the boys of course had no idea what was going on, but they allowed Beatrice into their car. It was then when Beatrice told them that a madman had assayed her, and that her friend was still in danger. The police were called, but they were still far away. The men inside the car suggested driving Beatrice away to safety, but she refused. She begged the boys to head in the direction of where Roman had driven after Lena, and so they did. While they began searching for Lena, she was still on the roof of Roman's car. But then, Roman came to a stop. He exited his vehicle, demanding that Lena come down. Lena agreed under one condition: he throw away his knives and hammers as far as he could. Roman then told Lena that this whole situation was silly before throwing away his weapons. Roman then appeared to be somewhat calm. This prompted Lena to get into the vehicle with him. Roman started up the car again, and the two began driving towards the campsite. Lena didn't have much strength left. She was exhausted. But then, as they were driving down the beach, Lena spotted a bunch of fishermen on the shore. This was now her chance. She put her bloody arm outside of the window and began waving frantically. The fishermen looked up to see a woman's arm hanging out of the car, covered in blood. The men were deeply disturbed. All realizing what they had to do, they leapt into their cars and began following Roman closely behind, hoping that they could save Lena. Remarkably, these brave men were able to corner Roman in his vehicle, and his car came to a complete stop. Lena opened the door and walked towards the men. Roman, realizing it was over, allowed Lena to get away. He simply just drove away, hoping to evade the police who would soon be coming for him. But most importantly, the girls were now safe, and now Roman was on the run. The police arrived on the scene, and the two women were treated for their injuries. Lena was in a horrific state. She had bravely fought Roman off for hours, or whilst having serious injuries. But she had lost an extreme amount of blood. On the way to the hospital, she lost consciousness as the doctors rushed to treat her. Meanwhile, the search for Roman was underway. A man named Adam Stewart lived in the area and owned a shop. This shop was the only one for miles and miles. Adam is incredibly familiar with the area, so the police asked him to assist in helping them to catch Roman, and Adam happily agreed. Adam had an idea where he could be, and it didn't take long until they found him. Roman's car was stuck in a sand dune. He had nowhere to go. Roman was swiftly arrested. Back at the hospital, Lena's condition improved, and her head was stapled back together. Lena was covered in so much blood and sand that when she arrived at the hospital, the doctors at first didn't know if she was a man or a woman. They could hardly see her features. The two women were then reunited in the hospital, both taking time to realize how lucky they were to be alive. Roman was then charged with a number of horrific crimes: aggravated kidnapping, indecent assault, causing harm with intent, endangering life, false imprisonment, and assault. The news of the attack, of course, spread very quickly. Roman's ex-girlfriend Sylvia saw the name Roman with a photograph of him in the papers, along with the words, Salt Creek. A huge amount of guilt then took hold of Sylvia. She thought to herself that if she would have spoken out about what Roman did, then the two girls wouldn't have been attacked. However, Roman had already been arrested for similar crimes, and the justice system had failed massively, so who knows if anything would have happened to Roman if she did. Then fear washed over her, as she remembered that Roman had planned a trip to Salt Creek before they broke up. She realized that she could have been one of his victims too. The trial of Roman for the Salt Creek attacks commenced in February of 2017 and was held in the Supreme Court of South Australia. The prosecution presented the harrowing story, with the photographs of Lena's horrific injuries and the blood on the roof of Roman's car. Sylvia bravely came forward and spoke of her own story with Roman. She explained that Roman had forced himself upon her on one occasion. She even had photographs of her bruises to show. However, the judge ruled that Roman was not guilty of this crime. The judge said that no SA had taken place, which goes to show that even if she did speak up against Roman before, nothing would have happened anyway. It then came out during the trial that Roman had been using the internet to watch violent and illegal content involving women. It was clear that this was an incredibly dangerous man. His social media chat logs were then shown to the court, where it was found that he had been in contact with 12 more backpackers regarding potential lifts around Australia. Roman was a serial killer in the making. He was ultimately found guilty and was sentenced to 22 years in prison. It is likely that he will die in prison where he belongs. The girls' quick thinking and bravery saved them both that day, and it is nothing short of remarkable. Coupled with the men who jumped to action to save them when the time came. They didn't know if Roman had a gun, and they put themselves at risk for strangers. It's cases like these that do sometimes remind you that although we cover the darker side of humanity, there are at least some good people out there. However, I shall leave you with something rather chilling. Following the story coming to light, witnesses came forward. They said that months before this attack, they saw Roman Hines getting some supplies from one store in Salt Creek. He was with a young girl who was most certainly a backpacker in his passenger seat. Days later, he returned to the store on his way back to Adelaide. This time, he was alone, and there was no one in his passenger seat. As of right now, no one knows who this girl was, and it's believed that she is buried somewhere in the dunes of Salt Creek.